Hi, this is Will with Courtside Tennis and Pickleball, and today I'm going to show you guys how to install a bumper guard. As you can see, the guard on this one's not super bad, but it's starting to get worn out right there, so it's going to start wearing out the actual graphite of the frame, so that would be a good time to replace the bumper guard. The bumper guard will come in a set, and you'll get the actual bumper with it, and you'll get all the replacement grommets. Even though a lot of times the grommets don't need to be replaced, I like to replace them just so they're fresh and you get what you pay for. So the first step is just like if you're going to restring the racket, the strings need to be cut out of the racket. A lot of times we have customers that don't realize that. They come in to get their bumper guard replaced, and they're always kind of surprised when we tell them they also have to get a string job. But yes, you do need to replace your strings in order to change the bumper guard. So we'll take out all the strings. Hopefully if you're changing a bumper guard, you know how to take out strings too, because the bumper guard's a little step above as far as difficulty level. But we'll get all these strings taken out. Over the years with bumper guards, I've kind of developed a few little tricks that make it faster for me compared to some other people. So I hope to share that with you. And as always, if you have your own tips and tricks when it comes to installing bumper guards, I'd love to hear them in the comments section. Other things when I take out the string that I can tell you is, I'm not going to show you, but sometimes on certain bumper guards, or if you're just beginning replacing bumper guards, what might help is if you have a heat gun or even maybe a nice quality hair dryer. What you could do is heat the bumper guard up. Like, you don't want to melt it, but if you get it hot enough, it'll become a little bit more pliable, and that will help installing the bumper guard. As you get better, you don't usually have to do that. Sometimes for some reason, like some of the older head bumper guards, they seem to be like a stiffer plastic. So that still helps me to this day. But when you're starting out, getting it kind of hot with a heat gun or a hair dryer, that might help. So once you get the strings taken out, the next step is most rackets will have the grommets kind of flared out. So not all of them, but some of them are kind of more flared out, so you have to cut those off. Recently, actually, I learned that I used to always do it with a razor blade. Just take a razor blade and I would just cut them off. Sometimes it would scratch the paint if you're not careful. There's always a risk of cutting yourself. So one of our employees actually told me that he does it with these snips that you use for stringing, and it actually works pretty well. You can just cut them off this way. It minimizes the damage to the racket, and it's actually a little easier. So you learn stuff every day. So any ones that look flared, I'm just going to try to cut off. That way I'm able to pull the guard out, which I'll show you in a minute. So let's go around the racket. Any ones that look flared, cutting off. Again, you don't need to cut every grommet, just the ones that look kind of flared out and would be difficult pulling the guard out. All right, and then the next step is taking the actual guard out. I'm going to grab some pliers real quick from our stringing machine. These pliers will help because you can start pushing the grommets out like halfway, and once it's fully like halfway out, you can just pull the whole grommet out. I'm going to throw these away so I don't get confused for a new guard. And then you just want to work around the racket. I kind of push the grommets out from the inside out as best as I can. And once you get it a little bit, sometimes you can use an awl to get in there and kind of get it out a little bit more. It's really surprising. Like, I feel bad sometimes because I've gotten pretty quick at doing them, but customers will come in here and a lot of times they're like, oh, you charge labor to put bumper guards on? And it's actually really hard. Like, it takes new employees that we're training how to install bumper guards. Sometimes it'll take them actually longer to do at first than stringing an actual racket. So it is a skill, and it does take you know, a half an hour or so for people when they're new to it. But so I'm just pulling it out, and then every guard's a little bit different. Maybe in future videos I can go over some of the other guards, but this one, the grommets are kind of overlapped, so I pulled out the side ones because the side ones go on top of this top one here. So the top one I saved for last. And then now that we got all the flared ones cut off, we can just pull it off pretty easily. Now we have a racket without a bumper guard. So yeah, we just need to install the bumper guard. Sometimes, every once in a while, if you shake it, you can kind of hear like a loose piece. Maybe some graphite broke off during play. Maybe a piece of the guard, very rarely, but maybe a piece of like a grommet fell in there. You can actually, like a lot of times, take this trap door off and shake it. Sometimes they're filled with foam, but sometimes the whole racket is hollow, so you can shake out anything if you do hear a rattle. Doesn't come up often, but every once in a while. So now for the fun part. The other note about bumper guards too is every racket, for the most part, has a unique bumper guard. And I'm gonna say 9 times out of 10, even if it's like the version 7 blade versus the version 8 blade, it is gonna be different. I don't usually try even to mess. Like if I don't know offhand if like one generation pure drive will match the other generation's pure drive, I just tell customers it needs to be the exact same generation. Even if it looks pretty similar, if it's off just a millimeter, it's not gonna fit. So you definitely wanna make sure you're getting the exact bumper guard for the model and generation of racket you have. But for the fun part, we just start inserting all the grommets back in. I'll start with the throat. That's usually the easiest one. I can usually just do it all by hand. Fits in pretty nicely. It's all snug. All the grommets came through flush. Next one, let's see what we got here. This is the top bumper guard. These are the sides, and this is a little piece that goes on the top once you get this one installed. The next one I'm gonna do is the top one, because this has to go on first. Not all guards are like this, but this is gonna go on, and then the side's gonna kind of overlap it like that. So we'll do this top one. The top ones, I would venture to say, are sometimes the hardest ones, because they're a little stiffer. My advice is try to avoid doing one side at first, because it kind of pulls the bumper guard and makes the other side harder to do. So what I do is I just try like kind of start in the middle and work outwards equally. And then I just kind of fit it in like halfway. Like I try to get the grommets in like halfway, I'd say, as best as I can. And then once they're in like halfway, what you can do is use the counter to your advantage. Meaning the grommets you can kind of see are popped in a little bit, but you don't want to like push them through yet, because they're going to get squished unless they're flush. So you want to get the grommets as flush as possible. I'm going to get a little bit of a skinnier awl. Yeah, so you can see, you just want to try to get, before you really truly start pushing them in, just try to like get them in to your best ability, and then before you apply too much pressure, we're just going to make sure they're as flush as you can. This guard's actually a little stiffer than other ones I've worked with in the past. So I'm going to try to pop the first few in. They went through. And again, I'm not going to try to do one side all at once, but try to do a few more, then move to the next side. Those are in. Some bumper guards, they're easier. This one's a little stiffer, but you really want to be careful not to smush the grommets. So like if it's not in totally flush and you push down on it and try to push the grommet through, the grommet will become smushed. And once the grommet's smushed, a lot of times it becomes almost impossible to put it through. You kind of almost will ruin the bumper guard. So you want to try to avoid that. So they're going in slowly but surely. We got an early morning call. We'll call them back shortly because we're not quite open yet. All right, cool. Got a little scared. I never had problems with bumper guards, but for a while there I got a little worried this one might be a tough one, but we got it through. Again, I did my best not to start on one side. I tried to kind of equal it out. All the grommets are through. Again, the biggest trick is start in the middle, work outwards, and then use the counter to your advantage. Kind of use the counter's force to push the grommets through and then push down. And then once you get them through mostly, like you can even use like the corner of a table or a counter to like really push the grommets through. And there you go. These side ones are probably the next hardest. Typically the side's like pretty easy to do, but sometimes down here they get a little tough. So what'll be easier is I guess to start up here if we're able to. We'll see if it gives me problems, but if you start up here, this will kind of pull this down, the top part down a little bit more. But as you can see, this part's a little easier. The only time that it gives troubles is sometimes down here because it's such a long hole. It's kind of hard to fit it through flushly. This one looks like it's going through pretty nicely though. So again, some of the grommets aren't like going through all the way, so it's an easy fix. Just grab it all, kind of push it through. Again, you can use the counter, especially that corner of the counter, to really get those grommets through. And then you want, I guess, ideally to have the whole grommet through, but once you actually string it, it's going to set the grommet perfectly. As long as that grommet is, you know, showing, should be fine once you string it. And do this side, same as the other. We'll see if this bottom part, especially on Yonex rackets, like the very bottom here, they can be troublesome. You just kind of have to keep trying until it fits through because it's such a long hole there. That was fairly easy though. Yeah, I see people doing bumper guards and they're sitting on a chair, they're not using the counter, and they just sit there and they struggle for 30 minutes, even an hour. So this way has always worked really well for me. Sometimes, like I said, customers are like, oh, you charge labor for doing a bumper guard, and I feel bad because certain bumper guards I'll do in 5 minutes, and then I can see why they are surprised, but it will mostly take people a good 30 minutes to do a bumper guard at first. But there you go. So all the grommets are through. Once we string it, it'll become totally, all the grommets will become totally set. And that's how you do a bumper guard. Again, if you guys have any other tips and tricks, I'd love to hear them in the comments. Please subscribe to our videos, and I hope to keep in touch. Thanks and have a great day.